are live. How's it going, everyone? I am Ryan Rebalkin. I am the host of the Rocky Series podcast, Going the Distance, and I am very excited for today's interview / episode / discussion. Today we have with us Mike Ricksecker. I'm going to explain why we got him on the show and why he agreed to come on the show. I'm very excited that he did. As I always do, and people that listen to my show know this, I always hashtag Rocky and search on Twitter for anyone that wants to talk about Rocky, or they share pictures or stories or whatever. And Mike, you did such a thing. You shared a story on your YouTube channel that I thought would be worth discussing. So why don't you just say a little bit about yourself, the podcast you have, your YouTube channel. You can plug yourself now because we got our audience right at the beginning. So plug yourself now, not at the end. Then we'll talk about the video that really caught my attention that I want to discuss. And I have a lot of questions. I'm excited. So let's first introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Mike Ricksecker. I'm an author and also what I call a ghostorian. So basically, I research the history of a ghost in the place in which it haunts. I'm also a huge Rocky fan. Yeah, you caught a video that I put out there on my YouTube channel, Haunted Road Media. So we do a lot of video production work relating to ghost stories, supernatural, the couple of live stream shows that we have out there that we also turn to podcasts, or Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Inside the Upside Down. Yeah, we talk about a lot of those types of subjects, but I had what I call a Mike's Morning Mug, which is my coffee vlog that I do on occasion, which I discussed as something that happened to me kind of throughout my childhood in relation to Rocky, always being a huge fan, and that kind of tapped into that a little bit. So yeah, the YouTube channel is Haunted Road Media if you guys want to go check that out.
There's a lot of videos on there. I went there to do some research. At least 100 plus?
Over 600.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. It took me forever to scroll down. I was like, I was scrolling down to see how far down this YouTube rabbit hole can we go. That's amazing. That's a lot of work. I mean, I'm a small time podcaster. I've only got 100 episodes released of this show. You do like the video and the editing and music and images. Is this a full-time gig, or do you have a job outside of this job?
I have a day job as well.
Oh, wow.
People remark how much work I put into everything that I do. Because, yeah, with the daytime job, I have everything that I do with Haunted Road Media, which is, the podcast, the live stream shows, the full paranormal investigation videos that we do. There's a publishing side to it. So along with my writing, I publish a lot of other authors as well. So there's a lot that I do. I get about 4 hours of sleep a night at this point.
One of these
days I'll be able to let go of the full-time day job and be able to do this full-time. So,
and who's that with you in those videos? The female? I don't mean to.
That's Shauna. That's my significant other.
I figured as much. I didn't want to assume, but I thought so. Because I watched a few videos. I didn't have time to watch 600. There's a couple reasons why I haven't watched a lot of them, because it scares the crap out of me. I'll tell you why, because at the end of the day, I'm a believer. And because of that, I get really scared about the reality of things that I don't understand. And anything we don't understand is usually leads to fear. And I want to dig to that later. But let's first address the Rocky side of who you are.
Sure.
So we'll talk to the Rocky fan listeners, and anyone who wants to stick around later or during this same episode about the ghost side of things, or I hope they do, because I'm really interested in what you have to say about that, because I know everything there is to know about Rocky. But let's talk about your video, and it's kind of like it was a psychic. You basically talked about, and I think you could probably do it off the top of your head again. You talked about how you were able to predict big plot points for both Rockies 3, 4, 5, and 6, if I remember correctly.
Right.
So why don't you go ahead and tell the audience the story and how that came to be?
Yeah, I don't ever claim to be psychic, although I do have what people would call sensitivities and what have you. And I believe it was more of what Carl Jung would call the collective unconscious, where basically there's all this free-flowing thought out there that you can tap into. And as a kid growing up, I mean, not understanding this at all, seemed to tap into whatever in the world Stallone was tapping into to get his Rocky ideas. As a kid, I loved the Rocky movies. Born in 1974, so I was young when the movies first came out, but just immediately latched onto them. I started writing when I did a little bit in first grade, but mostly it's like second grade when I was about 7 years old that I really got into writing and being creative and all that. Well, one summer I'm at my grandparents' house. I'm just doing some writing, and I decided that I was going to write Rocky 3. That was my goal. I was going to write Rocky 3. Within this plot that I had it in Rocky and Apollo became friends, and I also had it where Rocky fought a Russian in this version of Rocky 3. Of course, in Rocky 3, Rocky became friends with Apollo after Mickey died, and Apollo became his trainer. And then in Rocky 4, Rocky fights a Russian. So two big main plot points.
Well, we'll stop there. That's good. That's insane to me that you wrote. Now, how old were you when you wrote this?
7.
So you were 7 years old, and whatever the 7-year-old grammar was at the time, but you were like, Rocky and Apollo become friends. And you actually
it was simplistic, like, they run into each other, it's like, let's be friends, okay, that sort of thing. But yeah.
And then you had it so Apollo was going to train Rocky in your early draft there?
I didn't have them doing the training part.
That they were buddies.
That they were buddies. They became friends, yeah.
You had it so in Rocky 3, in your treatment, Rocky was going to fight a Russian.
Right.
Okay, that's crazy. Continue.
Okay. Few years down the road after Rocky 4 comes out, a little bit older now, and I started having some more thoughtful conversations about the movie series. I had a conversation with my mom about how the Rocky series had transpired so far, and I was like, I like the older movies better. He didn't have as much money. He was down on his luck. His big thing was that he just didn't want to be just another bum from the street. I just liked it better when he didn't have a lot of money. Sure enough, in Rocky 5, he loses all of his money. So another kind of like head scratcher. Wow, okay. So whatever I was feeling about that, Stallone wrote that into his script.
And how much before? I mean, there was a big gap between Rocky 4 and 5.
Yeah. There was like 5 or 6 years. I mean, let's see. I was in, I want to say 6th grade when 4 came out, and I was in high school when 5 came out. And when I had that conversation, I was still living in Massachusetts at the time, which would have been 87. It was a few years before 5 came out.
That's crazy. Kind of felt, hey, it would be great if Rocky went back to his roots. Let's settle down this series a little bit. Thus, we have Rocky 5. That's exactly what happened. So what was your treatment for Part 6 then?
Right, Part 6, which of course we didn't know was going to be called Rocky Balboa at the time. You got a 15-year gap, and pretty much feared the series was done. Every once in a while you hear a little rumbling that there might be something some point down the road, but nothing would ever come to fruition. And so several years before Rocky Balboa came out, I had this dream that they did go ahead and produce a Rocky 6. And within this dream, Adrian was dying. She was on her deathbed. She was dying. She didn't actually die in the dream or anything like that, but sure enough, Rocky 6 comes out, Rocky Balboa comes out, and she's already dead at this from what we believe is breast cancer, because all Rocky said about it was women's cancer. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's insane to me. I love it. And here's the thing. I believe you. I know some of our listeners might say, well, who's this guy? Why are we to think that this guy is? But I believe you because this actually happened to me, and not for the Rocky franchise. You remember that movie Small Soldiers? I think it came out in 1999. It had a young Kirsten Dunst in it.
Yeah. I never saw it, but I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, it was basically a bunch of toys came to life. They caused ruckus and trouble inside the house. And I wrote, and I'll get my mom on the line if I have to, and I have the original. I actually still have to this day the writing. I was probably grade, let's see, 3rd or 4th grade, maybe no more than 5th grade, and that would have made me 10 years old, and this would have been 1985, so this would have been about 14 or 13 years before Small Soldiers came out. I wrote a short story, because like you, it's funny, this is why I found myself connecting with you, watching your videos. I also wrote short stories, and I consider myself kind of a clever storyteller, and I wrote a short story about how my toys, because when I played with them as a kid, I always thought it'd be kind of fun if they came to life and I could interact with them. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if the things that they actually had, like the guns and lasers, the Transformers, the G.I. Joes, if all these things like would become real, like I could really get hit by their lasers or the lightsaber or whatever it was. So I wrote a story about how these toys became real, but still the same size that they were. They didn't get bigger or anything, and they were shooting and causing a ruckus and all that stuff. Fast forward 15 years, they came out with a movie called Small Soldiers, which was literally just that. And I told my friends about it. People did, some people believe you, but they always think, oh, sure. But it's like, I know exactly what you're talking about. What was that thing you called again about the collective? What was that referred to again?
The collective unconscious.
I believe it. And we actually see it happen a lot in Hollywood. When they did like A Bug's Life, there's that Ant movie as well. And there's always like these competing films that seem to happen at the same time. Songs that sound the same, things like that. In a way, you can almost argue there's only so many ideas out there, if that makes sense.
Right.
There's billions of people. There can't be more ideas than there are people. Some things are just going to basically overlap.
Yeah, but you're right. They all seem to happen around the same time. Well, you'll have a batch of different fantasy movies, or what have you, and they all just kind of come out at the same time, and it's uncanny how that happens.
So, what was it like for you that every time you saw the movie? What was your reaction every time you saw 3, 4, 5, and 6? You're like, oh my goodness, I had this thought before. I mean,
yeah, I had to laugh at myself. Really, it was just kind of. And especially with 6, being an adult and being able to, really look back at the whole thing, just kind of shaking my head like, you got to be kidding me. As a kid, when like 3 and 4 came out, I didn't quite get it then. And
right.
At that time, I was such a huge Rocky fan at the time. It was really so much overboard on it that I was getting picked on
right.
because of it. I didn't even understand that, I'm on the bus and, the kids are asking me to punch the seat on the bus like Rocky. I'm like, okay. So I punched the seat on the bus like Rocky, and they're all like, so I didn't quite get that aspect of it at that point.
So are you jealous that you didn't do a Rocky podcast? You're doing a haunted podcast instead?
Well, I'm like I said, I've always been, I forgot to grab it. I even have like some Rocky memorabilia around. Yeah, I mean, it's always been a part of me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I'm doing my Rocky podcast, because what you're doing, I couldn't do. And I really want to talk about this. And I hope our listeners are okay if we dive into your world a little bit, because that's how I found you. So I was hashtagging search on Twitter. I saw the video about, I predicted these things, and I watched the video and I believed you. And I believe you now that you did have that experience. People can argue, well, you're just one of 6 billion people and you had the same thought as Sly. And that's actually, sure. That's how it works. I think that's kind of how it works. You are a Ghostorian. Obviously, that's a play on words. I would assume it's a ghost historian.
Right.
Did you have anything happen in your life early, or like, why are you doing this? What's going on here? Are you insane? First off, are you insane? Because
no, I'm not insane. In fact, one of the reasons why I do this is to help people realize that they're not insane. So we have like a whole line of books called Encounters with the Paranormal. It's not just myself submitting these stories, people from all over just relating different things that have happened to them. What's happened in our past, like 50, 60 years ago, if you talked about seeing an apparition or hearing voices or, disembodied footsteps or what have you, you'd get thrown in the loony bin. And so for a long period of time, when people had these experiences, they just wouldn't say anything because they didn't want to get dubbed as being crazy or insane. And by collecting all these different stories, somebody could read a book of my experiences and be like, well, okay, that happened to him, but it didn't happen to me. I had this other stuff happen on. So by putting all these other stories together from people from all over, they may relate to somebody else's story, not necessarily mine. And so that's been a great thing. I have people from all over that'll message me and say, hey, well, thank you so much. You helped me realize that I'm not crazy. I really did have this experience, and now they can actually move forward. So
that's my problem, is I've had experiences. I know I'm not crazy, and that's what scares the crap out of me. Can I pick your brain a little bit about some? Okay. Why is it the majority of things happen when it's dark? Why can't it be 12 p.m.? When I'm having a bologna sandwich watching TV? Why is it at 3? What's with the witching hour? What's are they afraid of 12 p.m.? Why are we afraid of 3 a.m.?
No, I mean, a haunting or an experience can happen really at any time. A lot of the people that I talk to, like I'll talk to people from historic locations that are maybe a docents or a tour guide at some place, and they'll have an experience, in the broad daylight at some of these locations. So it can happen anytime. There's a lot of people that theorize, thinning of the veil and that sort of stuff during the middle of the night, or the way energy will work throughout the actual planet itself. And so at different points in time throughout the day, that energy will be higher or lower. And these are all different theories. But hauntings can really happen at any particular time. Sometimes it is the middle of the night. And I think at the middle of the night, we're kind of a little bit more aware of our surroundings. Things start to kind of slow down. There's not as much noise pollution and things like that going on.
Yeah, I thought that too. It's quiet.
quieter.
Yeah, you're
quiet.
You can kind of focus on that, which might always be around you. Well, I've got 6 kids, but I have 4 that live with me now because the 2 older are adults and they're out of the house. Yeah, it's chaos in my house. So if there's a ghost that wanted to haunt me during the day, it'd almost be a welcome relief to have that kind of quiet. But for all I know, maybe the door slamming is a ghost. I think it's my kids, but it could be a ghost. So I have a couple of experiences that I've had. I wouldn't mind hearing what you think they are. If you've probably have heard these things, because I've Googled before the internet, I would have these experiences and I didn't think I was crazy, but I doubted, like, was I just tired? Was I just young and imaginative? But now that I've gotten older, you hear again that collective experience. So this kind of draws into what you were talking about before. Like, how is it that I can have an experience here in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and somebody in Germany will have the same experience? Like, the same kind of thing will happen to them. Like, we're not making this up is what I'm saying. Like, why are we both experiencing the same fake thing, if that makes sense? Because there's a lot of skeptics out there about the supernatural, as they call it, or whatever. Right. So there are skeptics, and I understand that, and I get it. But my question to a skeptic is, why am I having the same experience that's fake that somebody else is having that I have no connection with? One thing I had happen to me was I was on the second floor of my house. There was a figure in the window. It was 2 stories up. And the easiest way to describe it, and I know you're going to figure out what I'm describing, but at the time there was no name for it. It was almost like a cloaked, non-forming, it was almost like a bed sheet was draped over a person, and it was black. And I could tell that it was looking at me through the window. It was summertime. The curtain was open. The window was partially open. And I remember looking at it, kind of being so terrified that it almost, even then I thought, this isn't real. And I even kind of went back to sleep. I can't even explain how I was able to go back to sleep after seeing this. And then it wasn't until I woke up in the morning, I'm like, oh my goodness, I saw what I saw in the window. And then I doubted myself, and then time went on. And then my brother in a different room at a different night saw the same figure in his window looking through the curtains. Like, the curtains were closed, but you could still see the shape of the figure outside the curtained window. And to this day, windows at night when I'm in bed, I'm like, I turn my back to the window. Now, am I insane? Did I see a shadow person? And if I did, what's going on here? Why are they looking at me? Why am I that exciting to them?
Yeah, it does sound a bit like a hooded shadow person, and I've had a lot of shadow people experiences. That was really my first big paranormal experience, was with the shadow person, where one was actually in my bedroom. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I was about 8 or 9 years old when that happened. I'm actually in the middle of writing a book on shadow people. These are such mysterious beings. There's a lot of different theories out there about who or what they may be. Some people say like all the shadow people are evil and nefarious, which I don't believe. I think they're just like people. Some have an agenda. Some are bad or what have you, and some are just almost, they don't care one way whatsoever. Sure. Who you are. So I think some are observant. They're just you wonder if they're just kind of observing humankind. I tend to think most are interdimensional beings. Some shadow people kind of act like they may be an actual human being that just can't form as a full apparition. Some will say that they're aliens. We don't know, and some will say that they're these evil demonic creatures. And there's so many different categories of one.
But do they know? I mean, here's the thing. This is my deal. It's like, why are you looking at me? And I like, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not that exciting.
Did it ever move, or it just stood there and looked at you?
It was motionless. As far as it was motionless. It's almost like I knew I made eye contact with no eyes, but I was like, okay, I see you. You see me. Roger that. I'm going back to sleep.
Right. It seems like one of those that are just observing you. And I kind of wonder if these type of shadow people that just stand there and look at you and observe, if they're just not studying humans, if that's kind of what they're up to right now, studying humans.
But now we have Google. Can they go on Google?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they Google or not.
So that was one experience. The other experience, now of course I was 13 or 14, so I was older. It wasn't like a kid, but I had some really crazy experiences as a child. And too many stories. I don't want to, I would say waste your time, but I have what I have considered an expert here on this stuff, because you study other people's stories. I'm probably not sharing anything that you haven't heard before. There was a very young memory I have. I was still in the crib, but I was probably anywhere from 18 months old to no more than 2, but I was still in a crib. Again, I've had this memory, and I knew this happened to me as a young child for years. And I would tell the story to my mom, and she, like, this story from her lips to my ears, she knew this story happened to be at least in my head, because I would tell her that it happened to me.
Right.
But I remember I was in the crib, and I remember 4 white figures around my crib, and I remember them being thin and grayish. I remember them being like long and thin, and I remember being touched. I'll never forget the feeling of my back was turned, and I could feel their fingers on my backside talking about me and touching me. And I knew that they were, even as a young kid, I knew that I was the focus of their attention, and they were discussing me. Time has gone on, and we hear about the Greys and all this stuff. And have you heard of anyone having this happen to them?
Yeah, I've heard of visitations like this from the Greys, almost exactly like that, as very young children like that, where you may even still be in the crib. I've heard very, very similar stories, and usually it's like that, where you have like 4 of these, like a handful of them, surrounding the crib, or the bed. But yeah, this is. You're right. It's not something I haven't heard before, but it's always, to me, I'm always interested in hearing the stories and try to just relate, how your experiences may differ or even be alike to other people's experiences. Again, it's one of those where people speculate what their agenda may be. They speculate as to what these entities are, whether they're some interdimensional type of being or an alien or something like that. To me, the jury's still out, although there are definitely different factions that are very steadfast in their beliefs on these things. I believe that they exist, but I think we're still trying to discover what exactly they are and what their agenda is.
What are we dealing with here when it comes to ghosts? Are they people that have lived on the earth? That's a common one, and they haven't quite made peace. That's often the story. They haven't made peace with whatever they've left behind, so they haven't left. Are they? When you say interdimensional, I mean, are we talking beings from the 5th and 6th or 7th dimension? And why? In the third, I know throwing a lot of questions here, but don't they understand that we're kind of unnerved by this?
Apparently not, because they keep appearing. Ghosts typically are people who had once lived in human form on this earth, and they may have some sort of unfinished business, or they might be stuck or what have you. I've told the story before about my grandfather kind of hanging around after he passed away until my grandmother passed, and I haven't seen hide nor hair of either one of them since. And they're people. Like when we do paranormal investigations, we treat them as such, that they're people, and we're visiting them, like we're visiting their house, sort of thing. What I mean by interdimensional beings, like shadow people may be that, the Greys may be that. Yeah, these would be something that exists on another astral plane, so to speak. An example that I like to give for this is an experience that had place. It was a restaurant called Johnny V's. It was in Muskogee, Oklahoma. We were doing a paranormal investigation, and we were actually just wrapping up. We had a couple people out in the dining room area, a couple people up in the bar area, and I was just kind of doing a last little sweep with my camera, getting some photographs and stuff like that. I walk into the kitchen through the main doors, and I just saw this shadow. It was just like a wisp of a shadow just dart across the room, and you heard this bam, this slam of a door. It was a little metal swinging door that was on the other side. So I came in the front, this door was on the side, and just blew through that. You heard this slam, but the door didn't move at all. So I was like, what in the world happened there? Right. So I started calling out to the others, hey, did you hear that? And they're like, yeah, we heard it. What happened? Like, I scared this thing, apparently, and it slammed into the door, but it didn't move. So I related the experience. You can hear it clear as a bell on the audio. It wasn't running video at the time. Like I said, I was getting some photographs. After examining this incident, countless times, trying to figure out what in the world happened, and the fact that I scared it, it took off the moment that I walked into the room. So I started wondering, okay, let's look at it if it is, something from another dimension. If we're going to theorize that shadow people, or at least some shadow people, may be from another dimension, was it that it was in, like I said, its own dimension, in Johnny V's, maybe saw me come in as the ghost, got scared of me and took off, and in its plane of existence, maybe it blew right through that door, but I didn't see it from my plane of existence, but maybe across the dimensions, the sound of that slamming door resonated. So, I mean, it's a theory. Don't know for sure.
No, this world's crazy. I'm open to all theories, because we're not going to have. How do we even have any kind of evidence, like as far as why? I believe in what is it, quantum mechanics, where it deals with alternate universes or parallel universes, and things can kind of cross, and we could almost like bump into other existence, and the veil becomes thin for whatever reason. We almost see, I like that idea, we see almost another TV show happening. You have like this crossover episode. It's like, whoa, what are we both doing here? And it's a little bit spooky for people. The last story I have, it was in my adult years. This was 8 years ago. I lived in this house. It was an old military house. I'm in the Navy. And I know for certain this house was, I hate the word haunted because nothing bad happened to me or the kids. But there was one room that my two older boys, who were kids at the time, I almost felt bad that I had made them sleep in this room. Just because I kind of consider myself highly sensitive. And I don't know if you find in your experience that people that seem to see or hear things, they seem to be, I hate the word sensitive, but I'm prone to people's moods. I know people's moods. I can read a room. I'm aware of my surroundings. And you know how some people just are clueless, which is fine. They just don't get body language. They don't get other people's emotions.
Yeah,
in a room.
you call it being sensitive or being a bit of an empath. Yeah.
Yeah, empath. Thank you. That's the word. Yeah, and so I knew this room felt odd and weird. I knew that my boys at the time were kind of like, but it's the only room that we had for them to sleep in. But nothing really happened. But there was times I would get up in the night, and I'd always close their door at night. And every time I go up to go to the bathroom, the door would more times not just be open. And that's a little thing. You're like, oh, no big deal. But the thing that really threw me off at that house was, and this was actually a daytime haunting. One was a daytime, one was a nighttime. I was on the third floor, like in the basement. So I was down in the basement playing video games. It was the middle of the day. And I heard running up the steps, like up and down the steps, carpeted steps. I thought, oh, that's my cat. He's being really loud. But the cat was outside. But I went up there and said, hello, did somebody come home from school? And there was nobody there. And I was like, okay, that was weird. But then it started to do it like daily, running up and down the stairs. So it got kind of to the point, maybe this is what you experienced a little bit, kind of always exposing yourself to something. I almost didn't get irritated, but I was like, oh, can you please stop just running around in my house? I actually spoke to this thing. It's like, can you stop running up and down the stairs? Just like I would to my own kid, and it stopped. And then the last thing that ever happened to me there, I was about to fall asleep in bed, and as clear as day, I heard Ryan, my name. And that, my friend, was probably the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I thought somebody was somebody had walked into my room to get my attention. Yeah. And have you ever heard of that happening to somebody where they had their name called out to them?
Yeah. That happens where somebody's name will get called. It is a little unnerving because, it's something that you don't see that, is now that knows your name.
Right.
I mean, it could be a good or a bad thing. In your case, it seemed a little bit unnerving to you, but you said that nothing dangerous ever happened there. So,
no.
Maybe it was something that just over time became familiar with you and running up and down the stairs, and it almost sounded residual until you said that, once you said something, it stopped. So not really sure what was going on there with the stairs, but yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen like with Shauna at this one place that we've investigated many times, Mineral Springs. We had something that did say her name, but over time, it's entity of a girl or spirit of a girl that has kind of grown attached to Shauna. And so there's more things that she's experienced with her since then that it's kind of almost like a friendship has started to form.
What's the best piece of physical evidence you've seen in your investigations where you would just die on your deathbed saying, hey, these things are real, folks. I don't care what the skeptics say. So what would be a story or two that you would tell somebody that you would think we should convince them that had they experienced what you experienced, this is something supernatural?
I mean, there's so many different things. We talk about EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. We're trying to talk to spirits, and we'll get some feedback back. And one of them that I thought was pretty cool, and any of them, a skeptic could argue, but we're at a cemetery one night, and just casually observing a grave in which, and there's a regular headstone. Back behind it was a gravestone from the military for the same person, and just kind of casually making an observation. One of the other guys there, hey, well, this guy's got two headstones. There's this one and there's that one. Kind of describing what they are. And, the audio recorder picked up somebody saying correct. I know it wasn't him. Everybody else. had been on the other side of the cemetery. So it's like, where'd that come from? It's just confirming, what I'd said. And I've picked up a lot of different things over the years, these like illuminated balls of light that, you see them, you take a picture. Okay, what in the world is that? Like the whole experience, the Stone Lion Inn, where, this bureau drawer slammed on its own and, start taking some photographs, and there's this white wisp in the air. That's okay. That may have been the thing that caused the drawer to slam. So, I mean, there's so many different things over the years. It's kind of hard to pinpoint one.
Sure. Well, yeah, sure. I like hearing, I'm getting nervous in my room sometimes. One last story, and because you talked about the ball of light, this is actually really recent. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was a different house, and we overlooked our yard. It's kind of like there's no other houses around our house at the time, and it was nighttime, and there was a flash outside that when I first saw it, I said to my wife, I said, "Oh, somebody just took a picture of our house." That was my response, is like, somebody just took a picture of our house. And in my brain's like, well, why would you take a flash photo 20 feet away from the house in the bushes? Because you're not going to see anything. You're like, why are you taking a photo? And then the light filled the room after that. So there was a flash outside, and then we both were legitimately like, now the light you could tell it had entered the room, but it was bright, but it wasn't like light bulb bright, or it's hard to describe. You could tell that the light was in the room, but it wasn't lighting up the room. Right. Does that sound like something you've heard before?
Yeah. Well, like that illuminated ball of light that I was just talking about a little bit ago. So we were at an abandoned church kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And, it's not like this thing had lit up the whole church or anything. You walk in to the sanctuary area, there it is, but it's not like lighting up the entire thing. Got a great photo of it, and then it was just gone. Yeah, it's interesting. It has its own contained light source, and it's just there. You hear sometimes where they do light up rooms, but you hear these other ones that they just don't, and they're kind of like all contained within itself.
Yeah, it was weird. It felt like I don't know how to describe. I'm not describing it very well. Like it lit up the room, but at the same time, it was a weird. Like my eyes didn't have to adjust. It's hard to explain. It was an interesting kind of freaky experience, and it was a clear. And I remember looking outside, saying it was a lightning. Could have just been a flash of lightning, but it was a clear night. I'll never forget. It was there because I'm trying to find the reasonable, like, oh, might have just been a flash of lightning, but it was clear skies, and I had some. I forget where I went. I went on some sort of Reddit thread and brought it up. Some people were saying, "Oh, you can get lightning flashes on the clear sky." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess." I don't know how that's possible, but it definitely. My wife was there to experience that one as well, so that was a little bit. It wasn't unnerving, but it was kind of. It went from why is somebody taking a picture of our house outside to now our room has been not invaded, but now there's that same light source is now in our room.
It's now inside, yeah.
So are people like me and maybe you, are we just prone to experience this stuff? Like, why isn't Charlie next door? Or like, why are certain people? Because I feel like throughout my life, like I've given you like 5 different stages of my life and 5 different experiences. What's going on? Like, why am I attracting this? And this is what makes me have a hard time sleeping at night sometimes, because I'm like, can I just not worry about somebody looking in my window or a flash of light or somebody calling my name? like I'm being picked on.
There's a whole world around us that we can't see, but it's there. And I think some people are able to tap into that a lot more than some others. There are some people that are just more sensitive to that than others. And that's what makes it a real challenge when other people are not seeing or experiencing these things and you are, and so you're trying to convince them, hey, I'm not crazy. This is actually happening. I'm actually seeing these things. And yeah, people who that happens to, it tends to, over time happen more and more often. We talk a little bit about with psychics where, they become like almost like a beacon out there for this supernatural realm where, they are able to see that beacon and become attracted to it. And so like my friend Vanessa Hogle, who I do the Edge of the Rabbit Hole show with, she'll talk about how she won't be like calling out to anybody. Just all these people will just suddenly converge on her. She tells people, be careful what you wish for, when others say, I wish I had that kind of ability. I wish I could do it.
I've heard that before.
She's like, you really don't understand what it is I see and experience. And she's like, there's a lot of things that aren't good that, some of these spirits are telling me, and that I get to see and visualize that just are not pleasant. So.
So I saw some of your titles of your YouTube channel. This is a good plug, but some of them are too scary for me to even watch. One of them is I think it's one of your later ones about demons. So my question to you is, what's the difference between a demon and a ghost? Is a demon just a pissed off ghost, or?
Well, yeah, a demon never walked this earth as a human, where a ghost has. A ghost is a spirit of a human being, and a demon is something entirely different. It's it's an evil entity that's just always been a supernatural creature. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of theology between the Satan, heaven, all that type of stuff, which people could debate that forever, but yeah, these are very evil, nefarious type of beings that basically are looking to destroy humanity. So they'll kind of they'll enter into your life, seduce you, they'll oppress you, and eventually possess you and destroy you and those that are around you. The problem, and where we got into that with that video, is are you haunted by a demon was the name of it. Our popular culture has really sensationalized demon these days. So you look at any of the paranormal TV shows, like they're just riddled with demons. All of the, a lot of the movies that come out these days, it's not just a haunting of a ghost or anything like that. It's, now it's the haunting of some sort of demon. It's become very sensationalized. Now I'll have people contact me, hey, the candle fell off the mantle. I think there's a demon in my house. It's just like, no.
Right.
No, you don't have a demon. You might have something going on. Let's back up a little bit.
So in your investigations then, like, what would you say a demon is? What's their agenda, and what would you do in a situation where you kind of thought maybe your house had one? And I don't know, what's your advice to anyone that thinks they might have one in their house?
Yeah, so we've done cleansings before. The one television show is on The Haunted. This was, when did that come out? Was it 2011, something like that? It was a case in Edmond, Oklahoma, and we never actually called it a demon. It was definitely a very malevolent type of entity. Our occult specialists, and we had a demonologist out there, Carl Johnson, they were calling it a wraith. So basically a human spirit that's become malevolent in the afterlife. Not exactly sure about the theology behind how that may change or morph, but in any case, so yeah, we did a cleansing of this house to push it out, which was actually very successful. It was a crazy night. If you watch that episode, the girl Taliesin, who was having most of the problems, had come into the house, and we had told the family to stay outside while we cleansed the house, and she had come inside just to use the restroom, and she started talking at something unseen against the wall. So Carl did a blessing over her, and as he did this, she doubled over in pain. On my audio recorder, when I listened back later, you could hear the word die, as all of a sudden she doubled over in pain like she got punched in the gut. And so we ended up picking her. Yeah, we picked her up. She was okay. She got back to her feet and all that. Back door started blowing open, which they actually didn't show in the episode. And we closed it and it'd blow back open. It was crazy. But we eventually pushed this thing outside, and when we got to the backyard, the wind had really kicked up. The animals were running around like crazy. Finally, it was like it was pushed out and it was gone. What was really interesting about that is, after it was all said and done, we went over to the family who was kind of in the side yard, and we were like, wow, that wind really, picked up and got crazy. And they were like, what wind? So yeah, when we encounter something like that, we'll definitely do what we can to, kind of cleanse a place, as we call it, and push it out of there.
Is it just go to somebody else's house?
Well, we don't know.
This point is probably like one demon getting pushed around everyone's houses, like keeps moving down the street. I'm telling you, you're a brave man. No, thank you. You call me to come take care of a demon in your house, I'll be like, I don't know, you should probably just burn it to the ground or move. Why are you not scared?
I mean, I was scared when I was a kid. It's just, I don't get scared at this. I'm more curious. I want to find out, what exactly this is, and why these things are happening. Like I said, there's a whole world out there that we're blind to. And when I started my writing, it was more mystery writing. There were some little paranormal stories in there as well, and of course, Rocky stuff. I even did historic fiction when I was that age. Go figure that. Yeah, I've always had that curious mind.
I'm just like you. I'm curious, but I'm not brave.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know about bravery, or maybe a stupidity. I don't know.
Well, isn't what they say? There's a fine line between being brave and stupid, I think.
Yeah. There's some sort of fine line there.
What's your theory or belief of death? Like, what happens to the soul, and where do you think you're going to go when you pass this mortal coil?
Yeah, I used to, believe in a heaven and a hell, and in that differentiation there where, you pass away, you get judged, and then you're either going to burn in hell or you're going to go up to heaven. And, kind of over the years, I've changed my opinion on that a great deal. So I do believe in reincarnation. I believe there's some place that we go for a while that is, kind of like a home for us, in that, we come down here, maybe there's something we need to learn, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we're testing out, maybe there's something we want to experience, or maybe something about our character that we want to better define. We really don't know why we kind of go through that cycle. I've encountered things that kind of tell me, okay, I've had a past life before, different things that I've seen, that I've encountered. And so I think it's this recurring cycle that we go somewhere for a little while, and then we come back here.
Deja vu. What do you think that is?
Deja vu?
Do you think that's your brain remembering what you said, past things have happened to you, and you're literally just remembering it again?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's things that have happened in this life, and some of it I think may have happened in other lives.
I love it when it happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but I've had it probably 30, 40 times in my 43 years where I've had a deja vu. And I'll be like, oh, I'm a deja vu. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, it's all in my head at that moment. You're like, oh, it's still going. This is the long one. It's just a weird thing because nothing's really happening other than the deja vu in that moment. I don't know. I enjoy them.
Oh, yeah. I had that in a dream. And it's okay. Yeah.
Well, this is where I kind of get behind your past lives theory. And I've also looked into, do you know Dolores Cannon?
Yeah, I've read some of her work. Yep.
Yeah, I've read Keepers of the Garden, so there's a plug for her book. It kind of brought to me some, I would say, light, but regarding what I saw in my crib, and so it's given me a little bit of peace of what this chaotic life is all about, and we're in good hands type thing. I subscribe a little bit to it. I'm sharing something pretty personal here. I mean, maybe people will stop listening to my show because once you start talking about some her stuff, but I sense that's what you were describing, life and death, that kind of spoke to me, that you probably have heard about Dolores Cannon and her work. So that being said, I've also thought about dreams. When you have dreams, and you'll be asleep for like half an hour, the synopsis in your dream is so intricate and crazy with relationships with people, and there's just no way that your brain could come up with a storyline so intricate. And you'll have like relationships, and these dreams are like people that you care about and people you never met before, but you have like true feelings for people and emotions. And I've cried in my dream. I've felt fear in my dream over scenarios I've never experienced in life or seen it on a movie. That I've often wondered if that's my DNA or whatever that part of me that continues to be is just remembering what was. I don't know if you've ever thought that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's also interesting that you mentioned DNA. I think there is a part of us that, some of these memories, some of these different things are a consciousness that we carry with us from life to life. And then I think there's also a part of us that is also transmuted to us through DNA from our ancestors. And maybe that's why we're always drawn to certain parts of the world and what have you. Or, sometimes we have different mannerisms of, our parents or our grandparents or things like that. So things that are kind of like passed down and transmuted over the years. It's really interesting. I think the things that we kind of take with us, it's difficult to know which one it may be. Is it something that's, passed down biologically, or something that's passed down consciously through our soul?
Yeah, I've thought both. The skeptic in me just says there's something in our DNA that's like a recording machine that our ancestors, like a hard drive, that we just remember past memories that are somehow coded into the DNA, because there's parts of the DNA that we don't even know. Scientists haven't quite discovered what each part or strand is for. Mm-hmm. And then there's that part of me that there's something about us that we carry throughout our life. So question for you, sure. Rocky related.
All right.
So are you ready to make your prediction for Creed Part 3?
Oh, I think they'll make a Creed 3, but Stallone is done.
So what's your prediction? I know, but I want your psychic, off the cuff. So we can have it on record. We'll have it on record right here. So Creed 3 hasn't even been greenlit yet. So what's going to happen?
Well, that's a good question, because this hasn't worked for me with Creed. It hasn't. It was like the first 6 Rocky movies, and with Creed it hasn't. And I don't know if that's because with the first one, Stallone didn't write it. He co-wrote the second one. Yeah, I don't know why this hasn't really worked with 3. The only thing I know is Rocky's done, and I thought he went out quite well, where he says, it's your time. And then he sat down, and it's just kind of like, there's Rocky sitting down. He's got the hat and kind of looking out to the boxing ring. And then he went to go be with his family, so it was a great way for him to go out. So they transitioned Donnie out to LA. So they've totally transitioned everything as far as Creed is gone.
So no psychic predictions. So now here's, just as a fan then, what is it you want to have happen? And would you be kind of irked if Sly did come back?
I wouldn't necessarily be irked just because, I'm such a fan of the series. Because of the fact that he says he's done, they gave him a great out on it. Yeah, it would be a little disappointing if they were like, well, let's bring Stallone back anyway. So it would be like a disappointment if he actually came back. As far what would I like to see happen in 3?
They fought the Dragos, and it's like,
Yeah, what do you do from there?
This is the same problem they had with Part 5, was you fight this big giant Drago, you almost have to kind of, you take away his money, and now is Adonis going to lose his money, or?
Yeah, that didn't work for Rocky 5, though.
No.
You can't be having a street fight with somebody.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, there's some different things that need to. The baby ends up with being deaf and all that. So there's some personal things that I think they'll need to work through. As far as an opponent, this may be sort of a kind of like a legacy thing. He's, they had in Creed 1, it was, all about the name and coming to grips about, he didn't want to be known as a mistake, was just, that was gut wrenching there in the ring. And then, of course, in the second one here, you have the fight with the Dragos, which I thought they did really, really well. I was impressed with that. He's proven all these different things, and basically, I think the only thing he really has left is his own father's legacy, trying to be himself, but also, he has to deal with the fact that Creed was, an all-time great.
I actually have a treatment that I think would work, and it would be a good Creed Part 3 ending to the series. And I won't go into great detail, but I want this to go on the record. So if this happens in Creed 3, I won't get any money for it, but I want the record to show this is my because I say Rocky dies between 2 and 3, but we see it off screen. It doesn't happen on screen. So I don't think anyone wants to see it happen on screen. I think it should be something that just, you could almost start Part 3 with the passing of Rocky. Like, you could almost have like Adonis at the funeral next to Adrian's gravesite. Now you've got Donnie visiting both grave sites the way Rocky did, but then skip all the way. I don't know how they get there, but they get all the way to the end of Part 3. Adonis loses. He loses the title. The end fight, he can go the distance. He can give it his all. He's already kind of an aged fighter. He's already 30 something. Like, he's past his prime. He was almost past his prime in Part 1. My treatment is that Creed 3, Adonis loses, but there's no shame, and he's not sad. He goes out with his family, and that's it. He's not a mistake. He's got a beautiful family. He got to be a champion. The belt has gone to somebody else, and it's over. The franchise is over. It just ends that everyone is just at peace in their life. That's kind of how I see it, that he does lose the final fight in Part 3, and then just life goes on.
I mean, that would be a good way to end it off. The thing I would disagree on is Rocky dies.
How dare you?
Oh, well, because, hey, the word has always been you can't kill Rocky.
I know, and I've said that on my show. They don't kill Rocky. I know.
Yep.
How do you write him not being in Adonis's life in Part 3? That's the thing.
He's retired. He's gone to be with his family. Donnie's cool with that. I mean, you've got the introduction of Little Duke, so Little Duke picks up the reins.
All right, I like it. Yeah, I don't want Rocky dead. I don't want him dead. I would love to have him back.
So he just rode off into the sunset.
Yeah. I don't. Well, are you looking forward to Rambo 5?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Rambo's always been fun.
It's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah, that's just it. Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like I had 1,000 things I wanted to say, and I don't know. There's so much I could talk about. I feel like I could talk for hours about this stuff. Hope our audience has enjoyed listening to some ghost stories, listening to an expert, and again, just tell everyone where they can find you, and go ahead and see where people can hear you on iTunes on one show, and then you have a YouTube show that's different than your iTunes show. Is that right?
Yeah. So the YouTube channel is Haunted Road Media. Look at a couple of podcasts that go on. So there's Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Inside the Upside Down, both of which we do on the YouTube channel. There are also podcasts as well. So you can pick them up in either location. And the podcast for Inside the Upside Down is actually the Mike Ricksecker audio journey. So we put the Inside the Upside Down stuff there, but then I also do some original content and other things out there as well on that podcast. So if you go to the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, you'll be able to pick up all of it. It's kind of like the base of where everything's at.
Right. No, you're a busy man. You're a good man. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Mike. I hope we get to talk again. I'm going to be following your stuff, and I'll be picking and choosing the videos that don't freak me out too much. So that's what I'm going to do. All
right. Sounds great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It was fun.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.